In March of 45 BC, the last remnants of the corrupt Senate and their Pompeian allies were defeated at the Battle of Munda in Spain. Julius Caesar, now unopposed, resumed his dictatorship and set to work putting the broken republic back together again. Caesar's actions and the rise of his successor Augustus would bring the Western world into a golden age that would last for more than 200 years. And though modernists may try to villainize these men, the real villain in the story is not Caesar, nor Augustus, nor is it Marcus Lepidus or even Mark Antony. The man who truly put an end to the Republic was none other than Marcus Tullius Cicero, the so-called constitutionalist and centrist who, at the first sign of trouble, cast out the sacred laws and constitution of Rome and embraced tyranny. There was a man named Lucius Sergius Catalina who had thrice been defeated in the elections for the office of consul. His pride wounded, Catalina began a conspiracy with the ultimate aim of overthrowing the current consuls and instilling himself as the head of the Roman state. A plan most foul, and one which Cicero, as one of the 2 consuls for the year, took very seriously. Catalina was eventually driven out of the city, while the rest of his co-conspirators still present in Rome were rounded up and arrested. At this juncture, the Senate had passed the final ultimatum, which empowered Cicero to deal with the conspirators as he pleased. And though he wanted nothing more than to see each man murdered, he decided first to address the issue to the Senate directly. Each senator rose in turn, speaking in favor of killing the prisoners without even a trial. From the consuls to the former consuls, praetors, and former praetors, until at last it came time for Julius Caesar to take the floor. This is what he said. "It becomes all men, conscript fathers, who deliberate on dubious matters, to be influenced neither by hatred, affection, anger, nor pity. The mind, when such feelings obstruct its view, cannot easily see what is right, nor has any human being consulted, at the same moment, his passion and his interest. When the mind is freely exerted, its reasoning is sound, but passion, if it gains possession of it, becomes its tyrant, and reason is powerless." I could easily mention, conscript fathers, numerous examples of kings and nations, who, swayed by resentment or compassion, have adopted injudicious courses of conduct. But I had rather speak of these instances in which our ancestors, in opposition to the impulse of passion, acted with wisdom and sound policy. In the Macedonian War, which we carried on against King Perses, the great and powerful state of Rhodes, which had risen by the aid of the Roman people, was faithless and hostile to us. Yet, when the war was ended, and the conduct of the Rhodians was taken into consideration, our forefathers left them unmolested, lest any should say that war was made upon them for the sake of seizing their wealth, rather than punishing their faithlessness. Throughout the Punic War, too, though the Carthaginians, both during peace and in suspension of arms, were guilty of many acts of injustice, yet our ancestors never took occasion to retaliate, but considered rather what was worthy of themselves than what might be justly inflicted on their enemies. Similar caution, conscript fathers, is to be observed by yourselves, that the guilt of Lentulus and the other conspirators may not have greater weight with you than your own dignity, and that you not regard your indignation more than your character. If, indeed, a punishment adequate to their crimes be discovered, I consent to extraordinary measures, but if the enormity of their crime exceeds whatever can be devised, I think we should inflict only such penalties as the laws have provided. Most of those who have given their opinions before me have deplored, in studied and impressive language, the sad fate that threatens the Republic. They have recounted the barbarities of war and the afflictions that would fall on the vanquished. They have told us that maidens would be dishonored and youths abused, that children would be torn from the embraces of their parents, that matrons would be subjected to the pleasure of their conquerors, that temples and dwelling houses would be plundered, that massacres and fires would follow, and that every place would be filled with arms, corpses, blood, and lamentation. But to what end? in the name of the eternal gods, was such eloquence directed? Was it intended to render you indignant at the conspiracy? A speech, no doubt, will inflame him who so frightful and monstrous a reality has not provoked. Far from it, for no man considers his own injuries unimportant. Many, on the contrary, feel their sufferings are more serious than is right. But to different persons, conscript fathers, different degrees of license are allowed. If those who pass a life sunk in obscurity commit any error through excessive anger, few become aware of it, for their fame is as limited as their fortune. But of those who live invested with extensive power and in an exalted station, the entire world is aware of their actions. Thus, in the highest position, there is the least liberty of action, and it becomes us to indulge neither partiality nor aversion, but least of all, animosity. For what in others is called resentment is in the powerful termed violence and cruelty. I am indeed of the opinion, conscript fathers, that the utmost degree of torture is inadequate to punish their crime, but the generality of mankind dwell on that which happens last, and, in the case of malefactors, forget their guilt and talk only of their punishment, should that punishment have been inordinately severe. I feel assured, too, that Decimus Silanus, a man of spirit and resolution, made the suggestions which he offered from zeal for the state, and that he had no view in so important a matter to favor or enmity. Such I know to be his character, and such his discretion. Yet his proposal appears to me, I will not say cruel, for what can be cruel that is directed against such characters, but foreign to our policy. For assuredly, Silanus, either your fears or their treason must have induced you, a consul elect, to propose this new kind of punishment. Of fear it is unnecessary to speak, when by the prompt activity of that distinguished man, our consul, such numerous forces are under arms. And as to the punishment, we may say, what is indeed the truth, that in trouble and distress, death is a relief from suffering, and not a torment, that it puts an end to all human woes, and that beyond it there is no place either for sorrow or joy. But why, in the name of the immortal gods, did you not add to your proposal, Silanus, that, before they were put to death, they should not be punished with the scourge? Was it because the Porcian law forbids it, but other laws forbid condemned citizens to be deprived of life, and yet allow them to go into exile? Or was it because scourging is a severer penalty than death? Yet what can be too severe, or too harsh, toward men convicted of such an offense? But if scourging be a milder punishment than death, how is it consistent to observe the law as to the smaller point, when you disregard it as to the greater? But who, it may be asked, will blame any severity that shall be decreed against these parricides of their country? I answer that time, the course of events, and fortune, whose caprice governs nations, may blame it. Whatever shall fall on the traitors will fall on them justly. But it is for you, conscript fathers, to consider well what you resolve to inflict on others. All precedents productive of evil effects have had their origin from what was good, but when a government passes into the hands of the ignorant or unprincipled, any new example of severity inflicted on deserving and suitable objects is extended to those that are improper and undeserving of it. The Lacedaemonians, when they had conquered the Athenians, appointed 30 men to govern their state. These 30 began their administration by putting to death, even without a trial, all who were notoriously wicked or publicly detestable, acts at which the people rejoiced and extolled their justice. But afterward, when their lawless power gradually increased, they proceeded at their pleasure to kill the good and the bad indiscriminately, and to strike terror into all, and thus the state, overpowered and enslaved, paid a heavy penalty for its imprudent exultation. Within our own memory, too, when the victorious Sulla ordered Damasippus and others of similar character, who had risen by distressing their country, to be put to death, who did not commend the proceeding, All exclaimed that wicked and factious men, who had troubled the state with their seditious practices, had justly forfeited their lives. Yet this proceeding was the commencement of great bloodshed, for whenever anyone coveted the mansion or villa, or even the plate or apparel of another, he exerted his influence to have him numbered among the proscribed. Thus they, to whom the death of Damasippus had been a subject of joy, were soon after dragged to death themselves. Nor was there any cessation of slaughter, until Sulla had glutted all his partisans with riches. Such excesses, indeed, I do not fear from Marcus Tullius, or in these times, but in a large state there arise many men of various dispositions, at some other period, and under another consul, who, like the present, may have an army at his command. Some false accusation may be credited as true, and when, with our example for a precedent, the consul shall have drawn the sword on the authority of the Senate, who shall stay its progress, or moderate its fury? Our ancestors, conscript fathers, were never deficient in conduct or courage, nor did pride prevent them from imitating the customs of other nations, if they appeared deserving of regard. Their armor and weapons of war they borrowed from the Samnites, their ensigns of authority, for the most part, from the Etrurians, and, in short, whatever appeared eligible to them, whether among allies or among enemies, they adopted at home with the greatest readiness, being more inclined to emulate merit than to be jealous of it. But at the same time, adopting a practice from Greece, they punished their citizens with a scourge, and inflicted capital punishment on such as were condemned. When the Republic, however, became powerful, and factions grew strong from the vast number of citizens, men began to involve the innocent in condemnation, and other like abuses were practiced, and it was then that the Porcian and other laws were provided, by which condemned citizens were allowed to go into exile. This leniency of our ancestors, conscript fathers, I regard as a very strong reason why we should not adopt any new measures of severity, for assuredly there was greater merit and wisdom in those who raised so mighty an empire from humble means than in us, who can scarcely preserve what they so honorably acquired. Am I of the opinion, then, you will ask, that the conspirators should be set free, and that the army of Catalina should thus be increased? Far from it. My recommendation is that their property be confiscated, and that they themselves be kept in custody in such of the municipal towns as are best able to bear the expense, that no one hereafter bring their case before the Senate, or speak on it to the people, and that the Senate now give their opinion, that he who shall act contrary to this will act against the Republic and the general safety. These powerful words moved the Senate to such a degree that several high-ranking senators changed their views and sided with Caesar, and the young praetor-elect would have won the day if not for Cato the Younger, the fearmonger who would reprise his role during the Civil War, instigated such terror among the senators that not only did they vote to murder the conspirators, but armed men were brought to the Senate floor, and Caesar left the forum in fear for his life. Thank you for watching today's video. If you would like to see more videos like this, and are interested in Julius Caesar and the history of the late Republic, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe.